My stepmother cut my beautiful long hair out of jealousy, but she didn't know it will make me the future Luna of the pack. Chapter 1. The scrub brush slipped from my bleeding hands, clattering against the stone floor like a death sentence. I stared at the crimson drops mixing with the soapy water, my reflection wavering in the puddle, silver hair catching the dying light from the window, making me look like some broken angel cast down from the moon itself. The other Omegas always whispered that my hair looked like spun starlight, but right now, it felt more like a curse. Liora. Celine's voice cut through the kitchen like a whip crack. The Alpha's family arrives in an hour, and these floors still look like a pigsty. My stepmother's heels clicked against the stone as she approached, each step a promise of punishment. I didn't look up. I'd learned that lesson the hard way. Look at me when I'm speaking to you, you worthless little whelp. Slowly, I raised my eyes to meet hers. Celine's face was sharp and calculating. Her auburn hair pulled back, so tight it stretched her features into something cruel. She'd been beautiful once. Maybe that's why my father had fallen for her lies. But 3 years of living with her true nature had carved lines around her mouth that no amount of expensive creams could erase. Sorry, Mother, I whispered, the word tasting like poison on my tongue. Don't call me that. She grabbed my chin, her nails digging into my skin. You're nothing like my Maris. She's perfection. Everything an Omega should be. You're just this. Her eyes raked over me with disgust, and I felt that familiar ache settle in my chest. The same ache that had lived there since the night my real mother died, leaving me alone with a father too weak to protect me and a step-family that saw me as nothing more than free labor. Where is your precious daughter anyway? The words slipped out before I could stop them. Celine's hand cracked across my cheek, so hard that stars burst behind my eyes. The taste of copper flooded my mouth. Maris is preparing for tonight's dinner, as any proper Omega should. She's upstairs painting her claws and choosing her finest dress because she understands her worth. Celine leaned closer, her breath hot against my ear. Unlike you. Crawling around on the floor like the servant you are. I touched my cheek, feeling the heat radiating from the skin. My mother always said, your mother is dead. The words hit me like ice water, and her precious little princess died with her. What stands before me now is just an Omega who forgot her place. My hand instinctively went to my hair, fingers threading through the long silver strands. Every night before bed, my mother used to brush it while humming old pack songs. Her hands were always so gentle, so different from the rough treatment I'd grown accustomed to. Asterisk, looks may fade, little wolf, but a kind heart will always be your true crown. Asterisk. Her voice echoed in my memory, and for just a moment, I felt strong again. Get back to work, Celine snapped. And if I hear so much as a whisper about your appearance from the visiting pack tonight, there will be consequences. She turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. Oh, and Liora? Maris will be serving the Alpha's son tonight. Try not to embarrass us by existing too loudly. The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of my ragged breathing. I pressed my palms against the cold stone floor and closed my eyes, letting the tears fall where no one could see them. Through the window, I could hear the other pack members gathering in the courtyard, their laughter and excited chatter filtering through the glass. Tonight was important. The visiting pack held ties to the royal court, and everyone knew what that meant. Opportunities, advancement, everything my step-family craved. Liora. A soft voice made me look up. Arya, the baker's daughter, peeked through the servant's entrance. Her warm brown eyes were filled with concern as she took in my tear-stained face and the red handprint on my cheek. What happened? She asked, rushing to kneel beside me. The usual, I whispered, not trusting my voice to be stronger. Arya's jaw tightened. She hit you again. It doesn't matter. It does matter. Her voice rose. Then she quickly glanced around and lowered it again. You can't keep letting them treat you like this. You're worth so much more than they want you to believe. I looked down at my reflection in the water again. My hair fell around my face like a silver curtain, catching the lamplight and throwing it back in shimmering waves. The other wolves did notice me. I'd seen them staring when they thought no one was looking. I'd heard the whispers that I was lovelier than any alpha-born girl in the pack. But beauty meant nothing when you had no power to protect it. The alpha's visiting son, I said quietly. Celine wants Maris to catch his attention. Arya snorted. Maris? That spoiled brat wouldn't know how to hold a real conversation if her life depended on it. All she does is preen and demand attention like a peacock. She's beautiful, I said, because it was true. Maris had inherited her mother's sharp features and amber eyes, and she spent hours every day perfecting her appearance. Beautiful on the outside, maybe. But you. Arya reached out and touched a strand of my hair. You glow, Liora. Even covered in dirt and tears, you shine brighter than she ever could. Before I could respond, heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway. Arya quickly helped me to my feet, and I grabbed the scrub brush again, pretending to work as my father appeared in the doorway. He looked older every time I saw him, his once broad shoulders now bent under the weight of his choices. Gray streaked his brown hair, and there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there when my mother was alive. Liora, he said softly, the guests have arrived. Celine wants you to stay in the kitchens tonight. Of course she did. Can't have the real daughter outshining her precious Maris. Yes, father, I replied, not looking at him. He hesitated at the doorway, and for a moment I thought he might say something else. Something that acknowledged what was happening under his own roof. Something that sounded like the man who used to read me bedtime stories and call me his little moonbeam. Instead, he just sighed and walked away. Coward, Arya muttered under her breath. I couldn't disagree. As the evening wore on, I listened to the sounds of the dinner party drifting down from the main hall. Laughter, conversation, the clink of silverware against fine china. The life I should have been part of if my mother had lived. If my father had been stronger. If the world had been kinder to orphaned Omega girls with silver hair and broken hearts. I was scraping the last of the serving platters when I heard it, a voice that made my wolf stir restlessly in my chest. Deep, commanding, with an edge of barely controlled power that sent shivers down my spine. Thank you for the lovely evening, the voice said. Though I confess, I was hoping to meet all of your family members. My hand stilled on the plate. Oh, you have? I heard Celine reply quickly. Maris is my only daughter. Strange, the voice continued, and something in his tone made my heart race. I could have sworn I scented another Omega in the house. Younger, with an interesting signature. The plate slipped from my numb fingers and shattered against the floor, the sound echoing through the kitchen like a gunshot. In the sudden silence that followed, I realized that my entire world was about to change, and I had no idea if I was ready for what was coming. Chapter 2. The visiting wolf never came looking for me, but his words haunted every corner of the house for weeks after. I scrubbed the same floors, served the same meals, and endured the same cruelty, but something had shifted in the air. Celine watched me with sharper eyes now, her suspicion following me like a shadow. Maris grew more vicious with each passing day, as if she could sense some invisible threat I posed just by breathing. Then the announcement came. The Alpha King will host the moon banquet in 3 weeks' time. Father read from the royal decree, his voice carrying across the packed meeting hall. Every unmated she-wolf between the ages of 18 and 25 is required to attend. My heart stopped. The moon banquet. I'd heard whispers of it my entire life. The legendary gathering where unmated wolves came together under the full moon's power. It wasn't technically a choosing ceremony, but everyone knew the truth. If the Alpha King's fated mate walked into that hall, the bond would reveal itself for all to see. Around me, the pack erupted into excited chatter. Young she-wolves clutched each other's arms, their eyes bright with possibility. Even the older wolves leaned forward, hungry for gossip about who might catch the king's attention. Can you imagine, someone whispered behind me, being chosen by Alpha King Kale himself? My chest tightened. I'd never seen the king, but his reputation preceded him like thunder before a storm. Powerful, ruthless, the kind of wolf who could command armies with a single glance. What would someone like that want with a broken Omega, who spent her days on her knees scrubbing stone? Maris will be perfect for him. Celine's voice cut through my thoughts. She stood near the front of the hall, her hand resting possessively on her daughter's shoulder. She is everything a king could want: beauty, grace, proper bloodline. Maris preened under the attention, her amber eyes gleaming with ambition. I've been preparing my whole life for something like this, she announced loudly enough for half the pack to hear. The Alpha King won't be able to resist me. I wanted to roll my eyes, but I'd learned better than to let my expressions show in public. Instead, I slipped toward the back of the hall, hoping to escape before. Liora, Father's voice found me anyway. You'll attend as well, of course. The hall fell silent. Every eye turned to me, and I felt heat crawl up my neck. I wasn't used to being acknowledged in public, especially not at pack gatherings. My hands went instinctively to my hair, fingers threading through the silver strands as if they could shield me from the sudden attention. Will she now? Celine's voice was honey over broken glass. How interesting. The way she said it made my skin crawl, but I forced myself to nod. Of course, Father, if that's what's required. Later that night, I lay in my small room under the eaves, staring at the ceiling and trying not to let hope take root in my chest. It was dangerous to dream. I'd learned that lesson the hard way. But as moonlight streamed through my tiny window and caught the silver in my hair, I couldn't help but wonder. What if the visiting wolf had been right to notice me? What if there was more to my life than scrubbing floors and swallowing insults? What if, for just one night, I could be something more than the unwanted stepdaughter? My mother's voice whispered through my memory. Asterisk, a kind heart will always be your true crown. Asterisk, maybe that would be enough. Downstairs, I could hear Celine and Maris talking in hushed, urgent tones. Their voices drifted up through the floorboards, too quiet to make out individual words, but sharp enough to set my nerves on edge. I should have paid more attention to that conversation. 3 days before the banquet, the seamstress came to fit Maris for her gown. I watched from the kitchen doorway as bolts of silk and satin were spread across the parlor like a rainbow made of dreams. Maris stood in the center of it all like a queen already, her arms outstretched as the woman pinned and measured. I want something that will make the Alpha King forget every other she-wolf in the room, Maris declared. Something that shows I'm worthy of being his Luna. Of course, miss, the seamstress murmured around a mouthful of pins. Perhaps the emerald silk? It brings out your eyes beautifully. I turned away before I could see more. There was no point in torturing myself with what I couldn't have. And what about you, dear? The seamstress's kind voice made me look back. She was smiling at me from across the room, her tape measure draped around her neck like a badge of office. Oh, she won't need anything special, Celine said quickly. Liora can wear something from her existing wardrobe. My existing wardrobe consisted of 3 plain dresses and an apron. All of them had seen better years, and none of them were suitable for meeting royalty. Actually, Maris said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, I have that old blue dress I outgrew last year. Liora can have it. The dress in question was a faded thing that had never fit Maris properly to begin with. It would hang on my smaller frame like a sack, but I nodded anyway. Thank you. That's very generous. Maris's smile was sharp as winter. What are sisters for? The night before the banquet, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the great hall of the royal palace, filled with the most beautiful she-wolves in the kingdom. I saw myself walking among them in Maris's cast-off dress, my silver hair the only thing marking me as anything more than a servant. Would that be enough? Could the moon's power see past appearances to whatever lay beneath? I must have finally dozed off, because I woke to the soft sound of my bedroom door creaking open. For a moment, I lay still, thinking it might be the wind. The latch on my door had been broken for months, and Father always said he'd fix it tomorrow. But then I heard it, the whisper of fabric against fabric, the careful placement of feet trying not to make a sound. Someone was in my room. I kept my breathing steady and even every instinct screaming danger. Through barely cracked eyelids, I could make out a shadow moving toward my bed. Moonlight caught the glint of something metal in their hand. My blood turned to ice. Scissors. Sleep tight, little princess. Celine's voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through me like a blade. Tomorrow, we'll see how beautiful you really are. I wanted to scream, to fight, to run, but terror held me frozen as she leaned over me. Her fingers tangled in my hair, lifting the long silver strands away from my face with something that might have been tenderness if it had come from anyone else. Snip. The sound was so quiet, so final. A piece of my soul fell away with that first cut, landing silently on the floor beside my bed. Asterisk snip. 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 Asterisk. Each cut was a small death. My mother's hands braiding my hair before bed. Her voice humming lullabies as she brushed out the tangles. The way she used to call it my moonbeam crown and tell me I was the most beautiful little wolf in all the world. Gone. All of it, falling away strand by precious strand. Celine worked with methodical precision, cutting close to my scalp until there was nothing left but rough, uneven patches. My pillow grew heavy with the weight of what I'd lost, and still I lay there, too shocked to move, too broken to fight. When she was finished, she gathered the severed hair in her arms like a silver shroud and padded toward the door. Sweet dreams, she whispered, and then she was gone. I lay in the darkness for a long time after, one hand pressed to my bare scalp, feeling the strange lightness where my crown used to be. The moon still shone through my window, but its light felt cold now, empty of the magic it used to hold. When I finally found the courage to look in my small mirror, the girl staring back was a stranger. Patchy, uneven stubble covered her head where long silver hair used to flow. Her eyes were the same green, her face the same shape, but everything that had made her special was gone. I touched the glass, and the broken girl on the other side touched back. Now let's see if the Alpha King would even glance at a bald little Omega, I whispered, echoing Celine's words from earlier that week. Outside my window, dawn was breaking over the pack lands, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. In just 12 hours, I would stand in the royal hall alongside every other unmated she-wolf in the kingdom. But as I stared at my ruined reflection, one thought burned brighter than my shame. If Celine was this afraid of me competing with Maris, maybe I was more dangerous than any of us had realized. Chapter 3. I woke to sunlight streaming across my face and the strange sensation that something vital was missing. For a moment, I lay still, caught between sleep and waking, my hand reaching automatically for the familiar weight of hair that should have spilled across my pillow. Instead, my fingers met bare skin and the rough stubble of what remained. The memory hit me like a physical blow. Asterisk Celine. The scissors. The silver strands falling like dying stars. Asterisk. A sound tore from my throat. Raw. Broken. Barely human. It was the cry of something wounded beyond repair. The kind of grief that comes from losing the last piece of someone you'll never see again. My mother's hair had been the same shade of silver, and she passed it down to me like a blessing. Every night, she brushed it while telling me stories about brave Omega Queens and the power that lived in kindness. Every morning, she braided it with flowers from her garden, whispering that I carried her love in every strand. Now it was gone. All of it. The last connection to the woman who'd made me feel like I mattered. Well, look who's finally awake. I turned toward the doorway, and there stood Celine, her face twisted into something that might have been satisfaction if it weren't so cruel. She leaned against the frame like a predator savoring its kill, her arms crossed over her chest. "Did you sleep well, dear stepdaughter?" she asked, her voice dripping with mock concern. "I hope you don't mind, but I took the liberty of giving you a little makeover." I sat up slowly, my hand still pressed to my bare scalp. The movement sent loose pieces of hair tumbling from my nightgown to the floor, and each strand felt like another small death. "You had no right," I whispered. Celine laughed, sharp and bright as breaking glass. "I had every right. This is my house, and you are my responsibility. I simply decided it was time you learned your place. She stepped into the room, her heels clicking against the wooden floor like a countdown to execution. Now let's see if the Alpha King would even glance at a bald little Omega. Somehow I doubt it. The words hit their mark perfectly, and I felt what little fight I had left drain out of me like water from a broken cup. She was right. What kind of king would want a mate who looked like a shorn sheep? What kind of wolf would see past the ugliness to whatever might lie beneath? The carriage leaves in 2 hours, Celine continued, inspecting her nails with deliberate casualness. Maris is already getting ready. She looks absolutely radiant, like a true Luna should. Her eyes found mine, cold and calculating. You're welcome to stay home, of course. Save yourself the embarrassment. With that, she swept from the room, leaving me alone with my reflection in the morning light. I looked like a stranger. Worse than a stranger, I looked like something broken, damaged, wrong. The uneven patches where Celine had cut too close made my head look diseased, and the longer sections that remained stuck up at odd angles like weeds in a burned field. Hot tears spilled down my cheeks, and I didn't try to stop them. What was the point? My dreams of the moon banquet crumbled, like ash in my hands. No amount of hope could overcome what I saw in the mirror. Liora. A soft knock at my door made me look up. Are you all right? I heard crying. Aria's voice was like a lifeline in a storm. Come in, I managed. She pushed open the door, her face bright with excitement. I brought you some. The words died on her lips as she took in my appearance. Her hand flew to her mouth, her brown eyes wide with horror. Oh, goddess, what did she do to you? The gentle concern in her voice shattered what little composure I had left. I collapsed forward, sobbing into my hands like a child. It's gone, Aria. It's all gone. She rushed to my side, her arms wrapping around me in the kind of embrace I hadn't felt since my mother died. Shuh, she whispered, rocking me gently. It's all right. We'll figure this out. No, we won't. I pulled back to look at her, and I knew my face was blotchy and swollen from crying. Look at me. I can't go to the banquet like this. I can't go anywhere like this. Aria's jaw tightened with the kind of anger I rarely saw from her. That woman is a monster. How could she do this to you? And on tonight of all nights? Because she knows, I said quietly. She knows that if I showed up looking normal, people would stare. They'd wonder. And Maris can't handle that kind of competition. You're not competition, Liora. You're in a completely different league. Arya stood up, pacing to my small window. Do you know what the other wolves say about you when Celine isn't listening? I shook my head. They say you glow. They say your mother blessed you with moon magic, and it shows in everything you do. Your hair was just part of it, not the whole thing. She turned back to me, her eyes fierce. Celine cut your hair, but she can't cut your soul. It doesn't matter, I whispered. Look at me, Arya. Really look. What alpha would want this? The right one wouldn't care. The certainty in her voice made me want to believe her, but the mirror told a different story. I touched my scalp again, feeling the rough patches where the scissors had been too aggressive. My mother used to braid my hair every night, I said, the words coming out broken and small. She'd tell me stories about strong Omega queens who changed the world with their kindness. She said my hair was like hers, a crown that couldn't be taken away. Asterisk, looks may fade, little wolf, but a kind heart will always be your true crown. Asterisk, the memory of her voice stopped my tears like a dam holding back a flood. My mother's words, spoken every night as she worked the tangles from my silver strands with infinite patience. A kind heart will always be your true crown. Not hair, not beauty, not the things that could be stolen in the dark by jealous stepmothers with sharp scissors. My heart. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking, but my spine straightening with something that felt almost like courage. She took my hair, I said quietly, but she didn't take my heart. Aria's face lit up. Now that sounds like the Liora I know. I walked to my small wardrobe and pulled out Maris's cast-off blue dress. It was still faded and ill-fitting, but it was what I had. I'm going to the banquet. Like hell you're wearing that old thing. Arya grabbed my arm, her grip gentle but insistent. Wait here. I have an idea. She disappeared for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. When she returned, her arms were full of flowing fabric in a shade of deep midnight blue that seemed to shift between navy and black, depending on how the light hit it. Where did you get this? I breathed. My grandmother's wedding dress. She was about your size, and she always said it was meant for someone special. Arya shook out the gown, revealing intricate beadwork that caught the morning light like captured stars. She'd want you to wear it. The dress was beautiful, more beautiful than anything I'd ever owned. But as Arya helped me into it, I caught sight of my reflection and winced. The gown was perfect, but it only made my ruined head more obvious. I can't, I started to say. But Arya held up a hand. We're not done yet. She pulled something else from her bag. A veil of the softest silk I'd ever seen. But it wasn't just any veil. Silver threads had been embroidered across the fabric in patterns that looked like moonbeams and starlight, and when the light hit it, it seemed to glow with its own inner fire. This was my grandmother's too, Arya said softly. She embroidered it herself with silver thread blessed by the moon priestesses. She said it would bring good fortune to whoever wore it. With reverent hands, she placed it over my head, adjusting it so that it covered the worst of the damage while still allowing some of my face to show. The silver embroidery caught what remained of my natural hair and made it shimmer like captured moonlight. I stared at my reflection, hardly recognizing the girl looking back at me. The veil transformed everything, made me look mysterious instead of damaged, ethereal instead of broken. They took my hair, I whispered, my voice growing stronger with each word. But not my heart. I will still go. Arya squeezed my hand. That's my brave wolf. A commotion in the courtyard drew our attention to the window. Below, Maris was climbing into the pack's finest carriage, her emerald gown spread around her like spilled jewels. She looked every inch the future Luna, beautiful, confident, born for greatness. Beside her, Celine cast one last look up at my window, her face twisted with smug satisfaction. She thought she'd won. Thought she'd broken me so thoroughly that I'd slink away and hide like a wounded animal. She was about to learn how wrong she could be. The moon sees everything, I said quietly, my hand resting over my heart where my mother's love still lived. Let's see what it reveals tonight. As I walked toward the door, my reflection caught in the mirror one last time. The girl looking back was different from the one who'd woken up that morning. Scarred, yes. Changed, definitely. But not broken. Never broken. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss more beautiful tales like this one. Now let's continue. Chapter 4. The royal palace rose before me like something from a dream, its white stone towers piercing the night sky like silver needles threading moonbeams. I stood at the entrance to the great hall, my hand pressed to my chest where my heart hammered, so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. Through the massive oak doors, I could hear the sound of hundreds of voices, the rustle of silk and satin, the nervous laughter of she-wolves who'd spent months preparing for this moment. You can do this, I whispered to myself, Arya's words echoing in my mind. You can do this. The doors opened, and suddenly I was walking into a sea of beauty that took my breath away. The great hall was even more magnificent than the stories had described. Crystal chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceiling like frozen waterfalls, casting rainbow light across marble floors polished to mirror brightness. Tapestries depicting ancient wolf legends covered the walls, and everywhere I looked, flowers bloomed in impossible abundance. White roses and silver lilies that seemed to glow with their own inner light. But it was the she-wolves that truly stole the show. They moved through the space like living jewels, their gowns in every color imaginable. Their hair styled in elaborate updos decorated with precious stones and delicate flowers. They were beautiful, every single one of them. And as I stepped into their midst with my grandmother's veil flowing behind me, I felt like a shadow trying to dance among stars. The whispers started immediately. Who is that? I've never seen her before. Why is she wearing a veil? Is she hiding something? I kept my chin up and my step steady, even as heat crawled up my neck under their scrutiny. The silver embroidery on my veil caught the chandelier light and threw it back in shimmering patterns, and I saw some of the wolves step back as I passed, their eyes wide with something that looked almost like awe. Liora. Maris's voice cut through the whispers like a blade. What are you doing here? I turned to see my stepsister bearing down on me, her emerald gown trailing behind her like liquid fire. She looked stunning. There was no denying that. Her amber eyes blazed with fury, and her perfectly styled hair gleamed under the lights. Everything about her screamed future Luna. I was invited, I said quietly. Same as you. Invited? Maris laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. You look like you're attending a funeral, not a royal banquet. What's with the veil? Are you that ashamed of what Mother did to your precious hair? The wolves around us fell silent, leaning in to catch every word of what was clearly about to become a very public spectacle. I felt their stares like physical weight, and for a moment, my resolve wavered. Then I remembered my mother's voice. Asterisk, a kind heart will always be your true crown. Asterisk, I'm not ashamed of anything, I said, my voice carrying further than I'd intended. I came here because I belong here, just like every other unmated she-wolf in this room. Maris's eyes narrowed. We'll see about that. When the Alpha King sees what you really look like under that ridiculous veil, you'll... Her words died in her throat. The entire hall had gone silent, not the expectant quiet of wolves waiting for gossip, but the profound stillness that comes when something momentous is about to happen. The air itself seemed to thicken, charged with an energy that made my skin tingle and my wolf whimper in my chest. Someone was watching me. I could feel it like heat against my skin, that prickly awareness that comes when a predator fixes you in its sights. Slowly, I turned toward the far end of the hall where the royal dais stood bathed in moonlight streaming through tall windows. And there he was, Alpha King Kale. Even from across the crowded room, he was the most magnificent wolf I'd ever seen. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that looked like it had been touched by midnight itself. His face was carved from granite, all sharp angles and commanding lines, but it was his eyes that stole my breath. Silver. Pure, molten silver, like captured starlight. And they were fixed on me with an intensity that made my knees weak. He moved then, stepping down from the dais with fluid grace, and the crowd parted before him like water before a ship's bow. No one spoke. No one even seemed to breathe as he crossed the marble floor, his gaze never leaving mine. My wolf was going crazy in my chest, pacing and whimpering and clawing at my ribs like she was trying to break free. She never acted like this before. Frantic, desperate, like she was calling to something that called back just as fiercely. Mate. The word whispered through my mind with such force that I gasped. Asterisk mate. Mate. Mate asterisk. He was 20 feet away. 15. 10. And then he was standing in front of me, so close I could smell his scent, pine and winter air and something wild that made my head spin. Up close, he was even more devastating. His silver eyes held depths I could get lost in, and when he looked at me, it felt like he was seeing straight through to my soul. You, he said, his voice rough with something I couldn't name. It's you. Before I could ask what he meant, he reached out and took my hand in his. The world exploded. Lightning raced up my arm from the point where our skin touched, setting every nerve ending on fire. The bond, the fated bond I'd only heard about in whispered stories, slammed into me with the force of a tidal wave. I could feel his wolf calling to mine, could sense the recognition that went deeper than consciousness, older than thought. He was mine. I was his. We were two halves of this same soul, finally made whole. The gasps that echoed through the hall told me everyone else had felt it too. That surge of power, the undeniable truth of what was happening. Some of the older wolves dropped to their knees in automatic submission to their Luna-to-be. No, Maris's shriek shattered the spell. She threw herself forward, her emerald gown billowing around her like angry flames. My king, look at me instead. I am perfect for your throne. I have the bloodline, the training, the beauty. She grabbed at his arm, but he might as well have been carved from stone. His eyes never left mine, even as she clung to him like a desperate child. She is just a bald, useless Omega. Maris continued, her voice growing more shrill with each word. She's nothing. Her own stepmother had to cut off her hair because she was so plain and worthless. A collective intake of breath went through the crowd. Several wolves hissed at the cruelty of her words, and I saw more than one face twist with disgust at her behavior. But Kale didn't even glance at her. Instead, his free hand came up to cup my face through the veil, his touch gentle despite the calluses I could feel on his fingertips. Her soul was made for mine, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent hall. No one else could ever be my queen. The words hit me like a physical blow. But instead of pain, they brought a warmth that started in my chest and spread outward until I felt like I was glowing from the inside out. But look at her. Maris was practically screaming now, her carefully styled composure completely shattered. She's damaged, broken. She can't even show her face properly. Finally, Kale turned to look at her, and the ice in his silver eyes made her take a step back. The only thing I see that's damaged, he said quietly, is your heart. And that, unlike hair, cannot be repaired. Maris's face went white, then red, then white again. Around us, I could hear the rustle of fabric as wolves stepped away from her, distancing themselves from her humiliation. Kale's attention returned to me, and when he smiled, it was like the sun coming up after the longest night of my life. Will you honor me with a dance, my queen? He asked softly. Through the veil, I saw his eyes flicker toward the silver embroidery, and something in his expression told me he understood exactly what it was hiding. More than that, he didn't care. I'm not much of a dancer, I whispered. His smile widened. Good thing I am. As he led me toward the center of the hall, I caught sight of Celine near the edge of the crowd. Her face was a mask of shock and fury, her carefully laid plans crumbling like sandcastles before a wave. The music began, a haunting melody that seemed to be pulled directly from the moon itself. Kale's arms came around me with perfect confidence, and as we began to move together, I realized that Maris had been wrong about one thing. I wasn't broken. I was exactly where I was meant to be. In the arms of my mate, under the light of the full moon, dancing toward a future that suddenly blazed with possibility. Chapter 5. The dance ended, but Kale's hands remained on my waist, anchoring me to this impossible moment. Around us, the great hall buzzed with whispered conversations and barely contained excitement. I could feel hundreds of eyes on us, watching, waiting to see what would happen next. The mate bond hummed between us like a living thing, stronger with every breath we shared. Are you ready? Kale asked quietly, his silver eyes searching mine through the veil. I knew what he was asking. Not if I was ready for another dance or ready to meet his court. He was asking if I was ready to claim my place as his Luna, ready to stand before these wolves and accept a crown I'd never dared to dream of. My hand went instinctively to my veil, feeling the silver threads that had hidden my shame all evening. Underneath, my scalp was still tender from Celine's cruelty, still marked by the uneven patches where the scissors had cut too deep. But as I looked into my mate's eyes, I realized something had shifted. The shame was gone. Yes, I whispered. I'm ready. Kale's smile could have lit the entire kingdom. He stepped back and offered me his arm with the formal courtesy due a queen, then began walking toward the royal dais. The crowd parted before us like a living sea, their faces full of wonder and curiosity. At the base of the dais steps, he paused and turned to address the hall. Wolves of the kingdom, his voice carried easily through the vast space, commanding attention without effort. Tonight, under the blessing of the full moon, I have found my fated mate. A cheer went up from the crowd, but Kale raised his hand for silence. But before I claim her as your Luna, there is something you must see. Something that will show you the true strength of the woman who will lead beside me. My heart hammered against my ribs as he turned back to me. This was it, the moment of truth. My queen, he said softly, will you show them who you really are? I looked out over the sea of faces, beautiful wolves in their finest gowns, waiting to see if their future Luna was worthy of the crown. In the crowd, I caught sight of Maris, her face twisted with desperate hope that something would still go wrong. Beside her, Celine watched with calculating eyes, probably already planning how to spin this disaster to her advantage. They were waiting for me to crumble, waiting for the humiliation that would prove I didn't belong here. Instead, I reached up and grasped the edges of my veil. My mother once told me that a kind heart would always be my true crown, I said, my voice somehow carrying through the silent hall. Tonight, I learned she was right. I lifted the veil. Gasps echoed through the great hall as my shorn head was revealed in all its damaged glory. The uneven patches caught the moonlight streaming through the windows, and I saw some of the younger wolves cover their mouths in shock. For a heartbeat, the silence was deafening. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of laughter or disgust, I saw understanding dawn on face after face. The older wolves nodded with something that looked like respect, and I heard whispers that weren't mocking but awed. She's still beautiful. Look how she stands like a true queen. The moon's light makes her glow. Kale stepped up beside me, his presence solid and unwavering. From somewhere in his robes, he produced a circlet unlike anything I'd ever seen. Delicate silver worked into patterns that looked like moonbeams and starlight, with a single clear stone at the center that seemed to hold captured fire. Before these witnesses, he said, his voice ringing with ceremony, I crown you Luna of the Silver Moon Kingdom. Not for your beauty, though you shine brighter than any star. Not for your bloodline, though your heart makes you more royal than any born to privilege. I crown you for your courage, your kindness, and your unbreakable spirit. He placed the crown on my bare head, and the cool metal seemed to sing against my skin. The moment it settled into place, power rushed through me, not the raw dominance of an alpha, but something deeper, older. The power to protect, to nurture, to lead with wisdom instead of force. I turned to face the crowd, and when I spoke, my voice carried with the authority of a true Luna. My wolves, I began, and felt a thrill at how right the words sounded. I stand before you tonight as living proof that worth is not measured by what others can take from us. Hair can be cut, beauty can be mocked, bodies can be broken, but courage and kindness cannot be stolen. That is true strength. I touched the crown on my head, feeling its weight like a promise. I was raised as a servant, told I was worthless, treated as less than pack. But you have shown me tonight that a queen is not born, she is chosen. Chosen by fate, yes, but also by her own refusal to let cruelty define her. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, and I saw several young Omegas near the back straightening their shoulders, their eyes bright with newfound hope. So I promise you this, I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. Any wolf who feels forgotten, overlooked, or broken will find a place at my table. Any she-wolf who believes her worth is tied to her appearance will learn otherwise. And any Omega who thinks she cannot rise above her station will see in me proof that she is wrong. The first howl came from somewhere near the back, a young Omega with scars across her face and tears streaming down her cheeks. Then another joined her, and another, until the entire hall rang with the sound of wolves showing their approval the oldest way they knew how. The howl of unity, the howl of acceptance, the howl of a pack welcoming their Luna home. When the sound finally died away, I saw something that made my breath catch. Throughout the crowd, wolves were removing pieces of fabric, scarves, ribbons, even strips torn from their gowns, and tying them around their heads in makeshift veils. In solidarity, in support, in honor of their queen who wore her scars like a crown. Long live the Luna, someone shouted from the crowd. Long live Queen Liora. The chant took up throughout the hall, growing louder and more joyful with each repetition. But through it all, my attention was drawn to two figures standing at the very edge of the crowd, trying to disappear into the shadows. Celine and Maris. My stepmother's face was gray with shock. Her carefully laid plans turned to ash in her mouth. Beside her, Maris looked like she was about to be sick, her emerald gown suddenly seeming cheap and gaudy next to the simple dignity of the wolves around her. They had tried to break me, had tried to steal my worth, my hope, my very identity. Instead, they had given me the greatest gift imaginable. They had forced me to discover that my true crown had never been made of hair at all. Kale's arm slipped around my waist, solid and warm and perfect. "Any regrets?" he murmured in my ear. I looked out over my pack, my wolves, who had accepted me not despite my flaws, but because of how I'd chosen to wear them. I thought of the young Omegas who would see my story and know that their worth wasn't tied to what others thought of their appearance. I thought of my mother, whose love had shaped me into someone strong enough to stand in this moment. "None," I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. As the celebration continued around us, I felt something I'd never experienced before settling into my bones. Not just happiness or relief, but a deep, unshakable certainty that I was exactly where I belonged. The Omega who had scrubbed floors and swallowed insults was gone. In her place stood a Luna who would spend her reign proving that true royalty came from the heart, not the mirror. And if sometimes I caught my reflection and smiled at the way moonlight danced across my crown and bare scalp, well, that was just between me and the moon that had blessed me with a love stronger than any cruelty and a destiny more beautiful than any fairy tale. After all, the best queens weren't born wearing crowns. They were forged in fire and crowned by their own unbreakable will to rise. Thank you for staying with me till the end of this story. Now be honest with me. If you were Liora and you finally became the Luna Queen, what would you do to your cruel stepmother and her spoiled daughter after everything they did to you? I want your raw truth in the comments. I'm replying to all of them. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story. See you in my next one. Love you, family.